Hello and welcome to today's NEASC Forum presentation, Unlocking Innovation, Maximizing Time and Space for Personalized Learning. We are so pleased to have presenters from Frankfurt International School and the New England Innovation Academy with us today with such an impressive depth of experience on today's topic. They are here to walk us through some key practices and effective approaches for maximizing student collaboration, experimentation, and agency, and allowing them to engage in innovation to flourish within your schools and your community. We hope that the insights shared today will help you develop more effective tools for maximizing time and space for personal learning to serve your schools better. And now, I would like to turn things over to my colleague, Kelly, who will help facilitate today's conversation. Kelly?
Thank you so much, Fran, and welcome everyone. We're so happy to have you with us, as Fran said, whether it's your morning, afternoon, or evening from all over the world. My name is Kelly Christian. I'm a member of the leadership team here at NEASC, and it's my privilege to moderate the discussion today with our panelists joining us from Germany, as well as New England in the United States. So without further ado, we'll jump right in. If you have questions, as Fran mentioned, during our webinar, please put them into the Q&A. We have hundreds of people joining us today, so the chat moves rather quickly. Q&A is the best place for your questions, but we did receive a lot of your questions ahead of time, and we will plan to answer them in the course of the discussion today. Let's get started with our panelists. We are going to hear about where everyone is coming from, who they are, and then I'd also like to ask our panelists to share a little bit of their why they chose to change or to lead or to teach or to attend a school with a flexible approach to time or to scheduling. So let's start in the United States. Let's start in New England. We'll go with Tom, Camp, and Lila, and then we'll move over to Germany, and I'll ask Jeremy, Donny, and Addie to share a little bit of their why. So Tom?
All right, thank you, and welcome. My name is Tom Woelper, and I'm the founding head of New England Innovation Academy, a young school now in our third year with 110 students in Marlborough, Massachusetts in the US. And I think I will talk about our why, sharing with you a bit of our our elevator pitch and our mission, because it all comes back to that. And we describe NEA as the first of its kind 6 through 12 day boarding school that uses human-centered design to teach empathy as the foundation for innovation, entrepreneurship, and leadership. Our mission, or our why, is to prepare the next generation of innovators and entrepreneurs to pursue their dreams and shape a better world. Students discover their passion and purpose, innovate with impact, and prepare for what comes next. And we do that with our pillars, or our how, and it's innovation and entrepreneurship, human-centered design, but also experiential and integrated learning, and fostering a sense of belonging and togetherness. So why do we have a flexible schedule? Well, you can't get at some of those soft skills or power skills like empathy, belonging, and togetherness, or develop an entrepreneurial and innovators mindset and skill set where you have to deal with ambiguity, pivoting, and iterating with a schedule that is too fixed. So for us to live our mission and to deliver our program, we have to have a schedule that is flexible. So that is our who we are and our why. Over to you, Cam.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Camp. I am the head of teaching and learning and also a humanities teacher here at New England Innovation Academy in Massachusetts. And my why is really rooted in my experience. So over my 29-year career, I've worked in co-ed schools, single-sex schools, high schools, middle schools, colleges. And so with that experience has led me to the point now where I understand that how important a flexible schedule is with the student at the center for their best learning experience and for teachers' best teaching experience, given some of the things that we want to be able to do in our program. So I'm now going to kick it over to one of my students, Lila.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lila. I'm a junior at New England Innovation Academy. And I would say, just as Tom and Cam kind of mentioned, pivoting and adjusting your schedule is super important. And I kind of knew that kind of trying to choose another high school to go to. And I thought that was super important because it says something else about kind of the morals of the school and how they're able to adjust and pivot to kind of anything as well, and listen to the students' voices is super important. So yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeremy Majeski. I'm the principal of Frankfurt International School's Wiesbaden campus. We're here in Germany. Our school has two campuses. One campus, our main campus, has just over 1,600 students. I have the pleasure of being about 40 minutes away from that campus on a campus of about 200 students. We serve students in preschool to grade 8. I was a former teacher and principal in the Chicago area before moving overseas to the American School of Barcelona, where I was for 5 years. And a big big topic when it comes to the why, I left sunny skies Barcelona to come to FIS. I think ultimately because of the opportunity. This campus, this school is known for putting students first, and I keep that as one of the North Stars. And so my why definitely is to come to FISW, to be thinking about students, what they need, what research says, and doing our best to put that into practice. Taking over moving over to Donny.
Thanks, Jeremy. My name is Donny Hansen. I also work in Wiesbaden campus in Germany with Jeremy at FISW. I think when I think of my why, I think it's our approach to our students over time on our campus. We generally start with who they are and spend a lot of time to understand them and for them to dispositionally, like, who am I? What do I value and where are we? And I did that as a student too, as I reflect back as camp head, as I look back, like I looked at my personal experiences and connected. As I moved through, I taught in the States, I taught in India, I taught at American School by a long time. I think that topic will come up later when we're talking about how would you maybe do something like this against an AP system as we move forward. But also there it was more about, are we creating having kids go through a system, or are kids doing something because they know who they are and they want to be creative and innovative. And I think as I've learned more about that, as we've moved down to this campus, one of my current jobs as being a sustainability coordinator and outdoor is the idea that as we're going to reach our aspirational things of being global citizens, like what does that mean? And as we dug down deeper, we realized if you don't care and connect with something, you don't protect it. So in order to be a global citizen and to start taking about the planet, then how do we connect and take care of that as understanding of myself and the importance? So that would be my why. Thank you. Addie, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks. I'm an 8th grade student at FSW. Where I've been for almost 9 years. And my why would be, it gives the students a chance to focus on their passions and think how they're going to use that to cause change in the world and how they're going to be that change in the world, while incorporating their interests and hobbies to really make it an individual change, or whether that's in them or in the world around them.
Thank you so much, Addie, and a special thank you to Addie and Lila for joining us today to share the student perspective on what it's like to work in a flexible schedule. So now that we've talked a little bit about the why, we're going to move to the what. So what exactly are we talking about when we talk about a flexible schedule or a flex day? We're going to get an example from each of our two schools. And then after we talk about a bit of the what and the logistics, then we'll move into the how. So I'm going to start us off over in Germany and ask Jeremy to share a little bit about the specifics of their schedule.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Kelly. What I have up here on our screen, as I had shared with you, we're a preschool through grade 8 campus. We follow this flex schedule all the way through. And I would say generally as a elementary teacher and former administrator of an elementary school, there can be a lot of flexibility when it comes to homeroom design and working with students at that level. Where things get a little bit more tricky is once you get into the middle school and things become a little bit more subject oriented, at least in the schools that I had been to. So I wanted to share with you all today an example of a 6th grade student's schedule and experience here at our campus. 3 years ago, we underwent a change with regards to our schedule. We had invited a scheduling consultant to come in and work with us. One of the big things that was extremely tricky is being a small school, we have a number of teachers who wear multiple hats. So our drama teacher, who is also our ELA teacher, who also teaches Spanish. So trying to incorporate all that into a schedule. In addition to, we have a number of part-time staff. So staff members who come and expect, they've got a schedule where they might be only working 3 days a week, alongside some colleagues who are working full-time. So there's a lot of complexity to our schedule. So we invited a consultants to come in and help to start tinkering with us. And we had a committee of representatives from all over the school to work on a schedule. And throughout the process of designing this new schedule, we constantly went back to our why. And as a committee who came together to form the schedule, our why was around students, flexibility, personalized learning. And so we wanted to get as close to that as possible. So I think having been at a large elementary school back in the States, as well as working at another larger international school, I recognize that sometimes you can't get all the way to that point where you'd love to be, but if you could slowly move to that direction of personalized learning, take it step by step. But for example, when you take a look at an example of our 6th grade student schedule, you see that we have a day H. We're on an 8-day rotation. One of the reasons why we did an 8-day rotation is because we had a total of 16 specials that we wanted to incorporate over the course of the week. And we knew that 18 divided by 2 would give us, 16 divided by 2 would give us that 8-day rotation. So our students in our middle school, you can see all start their school day out with advisory. We know that advisory is really important. We know that research says that middle schoolers need a small group of other peers to connect with, to build relationships with, and also form a bond with a teacher and advisor that works closely with them. So we have approximately a half-hour advisory every single morning where we incorporate social emotional development, our PSE curriculum. We talk about the day. Our teachers help develop goals with our students. Perhaps we're looking at portfolios and the type of work that they're doing there, also in their advisory. But then also the schedule was intentionally built around different grade levels. And so we know that students who are adolescents don't generally wake up until about 10 or 11 in the afternoon. In the morning. And so our schedule was built such that their morning is mostly spent around their creative arts, their music, their PE time. And so you'll see a block of their specials over the course of the morning, giving them that time to really wake up and get energized for some of their core courses in the afternoon. You'll see throughout the day in the afternoon, we have a series of both double and single blocks. One of the reasons we did that was, again, for ultimate flexibility. We wanted to offer teachers and students an opportunity to really dig into a science lab if they need to, but then recognize that there might be times where you might only need a 40 or 45-minute lesson to kind of move things along. And so we developed the schedule to allow for that as well. And at the last part of the day, we have a win block or a what I need block. And so this has developed and it's continuing to develop over time based on student input, faculty input as well. Basically, this is a time where we can do some ultimate differentiation. And so students have an opportunity at the end of the day. We put up a menu of options every week, and students can choose to attend a challenge math club. And so if they're really understanding the math unit right now, they're ready for some more challenge, they can take part in that. Students who might need some additional help in some literacy or some reading can get that help as well. There's a myriad of opportunities that are offered during that win time, in addition to plain old study hall. And I would say probably about 50% of the kids maybe sit in a study hall for the last half hour of the day on a weekly basis. And that gives them the opportunity to connect with teachers and making sure that they know what they're doing before they head off to their sports or after school activities. But I think the big highlight of today, and one of the things that we wanted to communicate, was our flex day on day H. And so on this day, we didn't want to schedule anything other than students' creative arts classes that they have in the morning. The rest of the day, the students are completely off schedule. As I'm sure Donny and Addie will talk about a little bit later today, that is slowly scaffolded. And so at the start of the year, we talk to the students a little bit about identifying their passions, getting them in like-minded groups, helping to form some workshops. We talk through sustainable development goals. We look at some of the bigger pictures to help them understand kind of what is their their why? What is it that they're looking for? And as we progress through those day H's throughout the course of the school year, this becomes a time where they're really honing in on their passions and doing things. And so, for example, we had a group of students last year who decided they wanted to build a chicken coop out in our outdoor learning area. And so setting aside that day H time allowed them that time to connect with outside veterinarians, making sure that they're connecting with the local authorities to figure out, okay, what are the policies around having animals on campus? What does it need to look like? And then actually just be able to build that time and have that time set aside. So all of our students are matched with an advisor or a facilitator or a teacher on that day to help guide them through that work on that day. And so day H ends in our middle school with an opportunity for students to reflect on their work and their project for the day. So they think about what they've done over the course of the day, and they set their intention for their next day H as well. And this has become a highlight of the day, of the week. Our student attendance on day H, as you can imagine, most people are going to try to get out of bed to come to school on a day H because it is that time of the week where students can really let loose and identify what their passions are. So we're really excited about where our schedule is. We continue to obtain student feedback along the way and making sure that we're constantly adapting as we move along. But in general, this is an example of what our sixth grade schedule looks like at this point. So I'll pass things off to my colleagues overseas, and we can look at their schedule as well.
Great, thank you. I'll pull mine up before turning things over to Camp to talk about this in more detail. But I just want to point to this first screen here. As I mentioned, we are a school in our third year, and this is at least our sixth iteration of our schedule. We are a school focused on human-centered design, so we're keen on getting feedback from our end users, from our students, from our staff, and from our families. So we've not been afraid to kind of iterate and evolve. So Camp, over to you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, as Tom said, we built the schedule through other people's voices, our stakeholders, and that's really important at a human-centered design school. So what you're seeing now is the sixth iteration of our schedule, and we feel pretty good about it right now. But I also want to put out the caveat that, yes, we're a startup school, and I acknowledge that many of you on this webinar are not in the opportunity to be at a school that is less than 3 years old. So part of that caveat is we understand that some of the things we've been able to do, you might not necessarily be able to do, but I'd like to think that we can be a good model for steps you can start to take to help with your flexible scheduling. So when you look at our schedule right here, we have a 7-day schedule, and we have a day on the end called the next block that I'll explain in a little bit. It operates a little bit different than Jeremy and Donny's schedule. So in our schedule, we very purposely and intently have it be a 7-day schedule because as a school that's focused on passion, we have certain students who might need to leave school early on a weekly basis for maybe an internship or some other type of program. And let's just say that was every Wednesday. So by having a 7-day rotating schedule, no class would get hit every single Wednesday for that student or that class by that student needing to be doing that. So we're flexible. We talk about it as a flexible mindset, where we have a flexible mindset about how we adjust the students and our schedule when necessary. So that's just a good example of why we need the 7-day cycle to operate so that we can do some of those things that we do. And also, just back in terms of the mindset, Lila, who's on the call with us today, she's in a class right now called Entrepreneurship 1 semester course, and it meets during Blue. And today, on a Tuesday, happens to be an A schedule. So Lila on the call right now is missing Blue class. So I went to her teacher and said, listen, Lila's going to be on this webinar broadcast to the whole world. And I just want you to know she's going to have to miss class. Surely she'll make up anything. And he was like, absolutely, 100%. And that's what I mean about the mindset, that if everybody's got this flexible mindset about what's best for students or what's best for experiences, then everyone knows you're helping each other out as much as possible around the whole school. It's not just one subject area department leaning in, like grabbing all this time. So that's why communication is a really big element of it. So on our schedule, you can see the end day called the next day. So this is very similar to Jeremy and Donny's schedule in that we can take that those blocks and drop them into any one of our letter days if we need it for some reason. We have an all-school event we want to do. We have certain things happening in curricularly that we want everyone to dive into, those types of things. But one way we do it a little bit differently is while I could, take that X day and be like, tomorrow on E day, we're not going to have E day, we're going to have an X day where everyone's going to be doing certain things. We also get very creative with how we do the X day. So you can see it's broken up by morning and afternoon. I might say only the morning's the next day, and then we're going to continue with your afternoon schedules for an E. Or, and this is, I know this is going to be challenging at some schools, but this is what we've done. What I've been able to do to manage it, to help it run more smoothly, is I'd be like, only 9th grade is going to have a next day in the morning today, and everything else is going to run on schedule. So by getting flexible, even with our flexible schedule, and being attentive to it, and again, communicating it all out, it's a way for the whole school to operate and get its needs for both student learning, but also teacher initiatives. And just a good example would be a math class needed a larger block of time than their 65-minute block, or even their 85-minute block, which is our period 2, to complete this full project, to get the kids into deep work and deep learning on building a solar model of some sort. And so I was like, yeah, no problem. Let's give you that time. So for that 10th grade class, we blocked off, we made a next day for those 10th grade classes, for that 10th grade class during E, say, and they were able to do that. And the students were able to stay locked in, get the teaching they need, have the space and time for them to think and trial and error their project for the aims of that class and for the aims of that one situation. So again, we really think about it as, what are you doing curricularly that you could use the more time? What are we doing as an all school? And how can we navigate it, move things around so that we're not affecting everybody with a big schedule change necessarily, but trying to make it run as much as possible so that the most important thing, again, is students at the center, teachers at the center about what they need, and really being attentive with a flexible mindset about how we approach that and view it and communicate about it. And obviously, sometimes there are teachers who would be upset because, oh my goodness, I'm using my orange block or something like that. And we just talk that through and communicate about it because we understand that. I'm not, as a humanities teacher, I would be like, oh no, I was going to do X on that day. But we really just coach each other on but it's okay. You'll be able to get to that the next day, etc. This is all about the holistic experience for students in their learning and teachers in their teaching.
Thank you so much, Camp. It's a great overview. Okay, so I think we're thinking about a lot of things now that we've seen the examples from both. And I think, Tom, you'll go ahead and stop the share there. You get a chance. Yep. Thank you.
And if I can just add one last thing.
Yes, go ahead.
Camp has been showing you what our middle school schedule looks like, because we share teachers between the middle school and the upper school. We had to design an upper school schedule that had some of the same beginning and end points, but you'll see in the middle school schedule, we thought it was important to have a recess and a snack kind of built in and some shorter blocks of time. And in the upper school, we have some longer blocks of time. So even within our class day, we've looked to be flexible to meet the needs of students at different grade levels. So just add that last point there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we did see some questions in the Q&A about the difference between middle school and upper school scheduling. So thanks for answering that. Speaking of flexible mindset, our panelists are doing a great job not only answering questions verbally in the webinar, but also in the Q&A. So you'll see if you're asking questions in the Q&A, we've got some great answers there as well for you. I know that the key themes I was hearing during those discussions were a real center on students, the why being making sure students could find their passions, making sure the way students' brains and learning work are being focused on during the course of these days. So just want to really applaud our two schools that are joining us for that student-centered design. And speaking of students, I'd love to shift us over to hear a little bit more about the student perspective. It's quite clear that students are at the forefront of everything that's done at the two schools that we're working with today. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more from Addie and Lila about their experience. And so my question, and maybe we can start with Lila and then go to Addie, My question is, could you tell us a little bit more about this experience from the student side? So the transition to the flexible schedule, what day H or day X is like for you? And then a second question would be, what does learning look like on day H and day X for you? So let's start with Lila.
Sure. So because my school is, our New England Innovation Academy is so new and in its kind of foundational stages, it has really kind of gone with the flow ever since I came here. So I wouldn't say there's much contrast between when I first came here and now, and how kind of flexible my administrators are and my schedule is. But as we've gone through many iterations, I can say it's definitely still a flexible schedule as we are now. And I really appreciate having that time to delve into kind of one class more deeply, because I'm sure like in the workplace and in kind of every place you set a schedule to kind of do things. Okay, we need to reach out to this person, and then those things always end up taking more time than you think they're going to take. So having like those 2-hour blocks to kind of really hone in on one specific class is insanely helpful, because it gives you time to do the kind of like the whole process of, like making assignments for each person, and then, going out and then, finding those obstacles and then tackling them and being able to go through that whole cycle, versus kind of just making the starting phase, then going to your next class and doing the starting phase, and then, so on. So I find it super helpful for that. And I guess, yeah, the learning is just able to go in so much deeper versus kind of just doing a surface level or an immersed level. I'm using kind of all of our grading terms, but an immersed level kind of through like all of your classes in one day. It kind of lets you really like go in, and then you remember more. I feel like for me, I remember more having more time to do that one specific thing. So I hope that answers those questions.
Great. Thank you so much. Addie?
Yeah, so for our flex days, our day H's, it starts with a lot of planning, and many documents, and talking about and sharing our ideas with our peers and our teachers, so that we can really get an idea of what we're going to do, and having all that support on those days, because the teachers aren't off teaching other classes. So we can always go to certain teachers. Like if I know I want to do something outside, I know I could go find Mr. Hansen, or if I need something, I don't know, about science, I could go ask my science teacher, because I know that they're all going to be available and there to help me. And also that all the other students are there and available, and they're not worried about their other classes, because we're able to work together and talk about what we're doing. So.
Great. Thank you so much. And a little bit of a follow-up question, because we're doing some right brain, left brain here, and we'll start with Addie. Is how do you feel on the flex days, right? So we're talking about what you do and how you might use your time, but how do you feel as a student on the flex days? Is it overwhelming? Is it exciting? What's it like?
Well, it can be a little overwhelming at first, because it is coming up with this whole new idea that you're going to be working on. But once you get your idea and you run with it, it's so much fun to get to work on these things that you really feel passionate about, and knowing that it's helping you and it can help the people around you as well. And it's a great feeling knowing that you're able to do what you love to help others or yourself or the world.
That's great. Thank you so much, Addie. And Lila, the same question to you. How does it feel?
I would definitely say that there's kind of a buzz going around. People get excited to really hone in on those specific subjects that they're going to be in and be productive for those 2 hours, so that, they're leaving at the end of the day feeling like they actually like kind of retained information. They, felt productive. They did that presentation they were meaning to do. And, that extra time to really focus and hone in makes, I feel like, people more excited. At least for me, for sure.
That's great. And I'm gonna ask a follow-up question we didn't talk about, if that's okay, because I love the excitement that the two of you clearly have for these flexible days. And thank you, Addie, for also sharing that it could feel a little bit overwhelming to figure out what that looks like. Do you ever have experiences with your classmates where they might feel overwhelmed or not exactly feel the direction to go? And maybe if either of you could share a little bit about what that looks like. So obviously you're with us here in the webinar, you're probably really involved in this, but maybe you have classmates that are less less involved or less excited or a little bit more unsure about what to do? And do you have any experiences of what that might look like?
Yeah, I can answer that. I think obviously learning is different for everyone. So every single student is going to have a different experience with these X days, as you said. But for our school, at least at New England Innovation Academy, like we do it together. This is not something that any one person is going to have to handle individually. There's always your advocate, there's your teachers, and most often, like we're doing these X days, we're working on a group project or a group collaboration. So you're going through it with a team and people around you to support you. So I would say, even though I'm not like someone that struggles with it, I wouldn't say I've seen that many people struggle with it just because of our support system, which I think is so important. So yeah, I would say all of those people get kind of the help that they need for sure.
Great. Addie, anything to add?
Yeah, if I could add on to that. So at least on our day H's, if a lot of students sometimes have struggles coming up with an idea and not knowing what to do, normally in those planning stages is when they get stuck, which is why we're always allowed to help around campus, kind of doing like community service so that we can figure out what we want to do while still being productive and helping people around campus. But we also have, because of the way that we plan it out all on our documents, and it's easy to ask a friend, hey, I'm stuck on this question, can you help me? Or ask a teacher and to help you get unstuck so that you can run with an idea.
That's great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate those answers. So we're going to turn it over to the adults now and ask the same question because it can be just as overwhelming, I think, probably for an adult to give up some of that control on that day or to approach things a little bit differently. And I'd love to hear, maybe we can start in Germany with Jeremy and Donny and then move over back to the United States. Here, how do you feel on those days? And maybe a little bit of the same kind of question. So maybe for you, it's not what happens when a student doesn't know what to do, but maybe some teachers or some colleagues that have a little bit of a challenge of accepting this new mindset. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, so in just a second, I'll pass things over to Donny, who really is the champion when it comes to all of the organization behind the scenes. But I have to say, what it feels like. So, for every day H, we start out with a community-wide assembly. We have we have a commons area in our school where we have 3-year-olds all the way up through 8th grade who come together. And we spend about 20-30 minutes having performances, having students share their learning, projects. And so it really kind of brings us together and grounds us on that day. And then the day is kind of set free. And when I was thinking about how I feel on that day, it's actually quite interesting. Just a few days ago, we had a day H, and I was just writing down a list of all the things that I knew that was happening right outside of my door. And so, as I have students preparing to make smoothies at lunch because they're trying to, sell smoothies in order to raise funds for a garden. I've got students who are coming down working with the art teacher who are trying to get a design approved by me in order to have a mural painted. I had students right outside my office. We have a disgusting lost and found, as I'm sure many schools do. And I had a group of students figure out, okay, how do we design a solution to, this lost and found idea? And so I just have to say, the buzz around campus on the day H, it's definitely lively. There's definitely a lot going on, but it doesn't just happen. And so I want to pass things off to Donny to maybe talk a little bit about the kind of behind the scenes work to organize all that in place.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, as probably everyone's wondering, in their minds right now, I'm a systems person. You're looking at systems inside of systems inside of systems inside of systems. I'm sure that Camp's got that end. So yeah, I think the biggest thing is what Jeremy said is the community feel. You have to have the mindset and the ability that everyone's there for you. So you start kind of from the inside of it's a team effort. And then as Addie has looked into too, we've had a lot of the staff take PD from Compass Education and Inspire Citizens and a lot of other around, systems that we could use. We have a lot of agreed frameworks that we start to kind of go even from grade 2 all the way to grade 8. And then we moderate them pedagogically that kids work inside of. This is my reflection tool. This is my feedback tool. I set goals. These are goods goals. So there's all these to give more autonomy. The goal is autonomy. But like Addie said, like we always say to everyone, like everyone's on a continuum. Like we have, as Jeremy said, we don't just do a DT problem bank, which the other campus does. We do a service bank, which is just making people feel good to give back. So when students are on that continuum on a day, you could be planning your own learning, you could be supporting someone else's learning, or you could be giving time to others. So it's to know that wherever you are, I think our last, in the background too, there are a group of us that keep track of every student and know exactly where they are in that continuum and how much time they spend in certain areas based on, is it just a day? Is it a routine? I think the last one we had is we had 7 out of our, we had 7, we have 58 students in our middle school. So we had 7 that basically continue like to do just to serve and stuff. We have 7 that kind of like to help others, but then that leaves us with a considerable amount of students that are owing their own or in group work. We have systems that we keep track of. We ask the staff to self-choose too. So it's not just about students, like teachers can identify areas that they want to support and mentor. All of our middle school students have mentors, similar to some schools that maybe do the PYP. In their grade 5 section, they go PYPX. It's kind of like that. But we say, why can't all students have a mentor all the time when they do that to feel supported? But then teachers also, from all the way from down to First Steps, our 3-year-old programs, they just kind of say, hey, we're doing this in the day. We could use some help here. And then people keep track of, hey, I'm free on this day if you need any help. So we have systems that basically accountability, but also just to kind of share in the background. I generally am always looking at that. So I'm very excited to see how it's all going to play out and kind of keep data on our improvements and where we can kind of lift. And always, as Jeremy says too, that any little step in any direction is a positive step forward, no matter how small. So as we go. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Donny. And so I'm going to take your feeling word as excited. Is that a correct? Okay, perfect. Perfect. I appreciate all that background as well. And we did have one quick clarifying question, a DT problem bank, if you could define that for us.
Yeah, I'll go quickly. So the other campus is a far larger campus, like 1,600. So what they do is to look from empathy. So how can you have a client in order to do a problem? So anyone in the community can put forth a DT problem and identify it. And then students work on authentic problems to solve those to actually with a client. We do that also. So it could be any contributor. So that's a problem bank that we usually do through surveys. And then we keep track of this from basically Google Forms to Sheets. And then we always have that available on student systems of what they could choose. So thank you. Great question.
Donny is the king of acronyms. And so just DT clearly is design technology. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you so much. Let's turn it over to New England. Tom and Camp, how do you feel on your day X?
And I'll jump in here and then I will go to Camp, and I will start that we have a certain advantage of being a young school. I realize, as I mentioned, we're in year 3, and I realize probably most of the other people on this Zoom are at schools that have been around for decades, if not 100 years. And as a school focused on innovation and a startup mentality, that flexibility, that adaptability has been baked into our kind of culture and our DNA. So I think that Camp has mentioned the kind of mindset, that flexible, adaptable mindset. So I think many of our staff have that. And one thing I talk about is talking to staff and to families is to say, focus on what we do, not on what we don't do. And these flex days allow us to do some really cool, awesome stuff. So I'll pass over to Camp to pick up some more of the details.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'll make 3 quick points. The first is I feel on the ground level, it's vibrant and vigorous for student learning and class experiences. And on the ground level, I offer gratitude a lot and thanks for the people who have to be flexible and give up that class time. So we're not just saying like, hey, yeah, sorry, you don't have that class. Like I'm always saying like, thank you to them for that and communicating that. The other level, what we're able to do, so for example, Lila's in 11th grade and we have a class called Innovation Studio, and they were doing a presentation. And so there were 2 different sections of it. The teacher wanted them all to be together. So basically planned a little X block for one of the classes so that they could be with the whole 11th grade. Parents and guardians were invited in, other teachers around the school for those presentations. So it's also allows for like a rallying point of community sometimes for how we use the next day, which is, I think, super exciting. And again, the feeling in the school where they're, family members and constituents and stakeholders coming in the building and being able to experience this because we've created that time. And the last thing, as somebody asked a great question in the chat, in the Q&A that I answered about integration. So we integrate a lot at NEA. I'd say as teachers, it's not the exception that we integrate with other subject areas, it's the expectation. And so as a teacher who does a lot of integration as a humanities teacher, I was doing a integration with the theater teacher about about different types of theater. And so, yes, we have different time blocks, like my class was during blue and hers was during orange. So yes, we're operating in our own ways with some of our integrated material, but then I was able to build a next day for one day where we could all get together. It's then team taught. The students are all experiencing the same message together, and it just deepens that learning experience in that way, which again, I just feel like is just an awesome feeling on campus of like the learning that's happening.
Thank you so much. So our time is flying, as it always does, with our 1 hour forums, but we have a couple more questions to get to. And I want to start off by asking a question that I think is on the mind of a lot of our attendees, and certainly was one of the questions sent to us ahead of time. This is all great. You know, Tom just shared with us, let's focus on what we're doing and what we're not, instead of what we're not doing. But I think what we're not doing is on the minds of some. So with all the required hours we need, with all the required coursework, how is their time? How is their time to take this collaborative learning, this experiential time, this extra, what feels extra, though I know is integral to the core of both of your schools. So maybe if I could start with Jeremy to answer that question. Where is the time? What are you not doing in order to do this?
Yeah, so I don't have a complete answer. I'd worked in the public schools back in the States, and I know that we had required minutes that we had to teach over the course of the week. But one of the things I want to challenge you all with is when we looked at our schedule, where is it written that every student needs to have 50 minutes of math a day or 60 minutes to understand math? There are some students in that math lesson who are going to get it and be done in 10, 15, 20 minutes and ready to move on. There are others who are going to need 2 hours to get that math concept. And so, you know, when we looked at our schedule, we looked at it more of a balanced approach. And so being able to offer perhaps shorter blocks of math or science or whatever it might be, but then recognizing we have that win time, that what I need time at the end of the day to offer a little bit more of that balance. Again, if we're trying to, if personalized learning is our North Star, how are we really trying to personalize instruction for kids? They don't all need to be in the same boxes. But then, you know, also when we think about that day H, we are taking away from time in seat classes in the core subject matters. But when I recently met with a group of 6th graders last week, and I asked them about their experience with day H. And I said, okay, your parents are the biggest critics here. They're going to say, what are you learning on day H? Looking at my old notes right now, and they said, making me responsible, making me learn how to plan out a whole project, having to manage yourself and problem solve, and then just really learn a lot of interesting things that matter to you. And I just challenge everyone who's on this call today to think about ways in which to break free a little bit from the barriers that are often put on us, and think about you know, schedules and require time a little bit more flexibly.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I want to follow up with that right into a question about what does it look like if you have an external curriculum like an AP or an IB? We already had a question in the chat, and I know, Donny, you have some experience with this from the AP perspective. So maybe if you could lend a little bit of your expertise.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're at a school, you know, a school that basically, you know, I guess internationally call them tier 1 schools, you know, your reputation. I mean, FIS is one of the 6 founding schools of IB. Like, these are big institutions with big reputations online with externals. But I think I just answered a question from Michelle Kuhn. She's one of the hundreds of people on here too. She was, I had the honor of working with her at American School of Dubai as the curriculum director. She was our curriculum director. And Michelle Remington, who I know is a superintendent of some schools. And what it came up is there was 2 of us, Mike Nelson, who works in Tokyo right now. We realized that we tried to have the perfect system, the perfect high school system. So we had a huge perfect system in high school. You know, we had 3 full-time staff and assistants. We had over 17 offerings. Imagine that. Just in art alone, we had 17 offerings. And then we talked to technology, and they had, oh, we have all these offerings. And then we just realized it was unmanageable, you know, and we were like, what's, you know, why do we have, you know, drawing and painting 3 and independence and all these things? So we basically had the opportunity. We had to, we talked to a lot of the, you know, our exit plans. You know, why don't we talk to, you know, Chicago Institute? We had some good relationships in international schools. When recruiters come to visit, you can ask them direct questions about, you know, getting into schools. And then we had to create a system. So we had a chance to say, okay, if we don't go lower on our external marks with our scores, you know, and we were particular AP, and how are we going to honor the learning in our curriculum? And we had a plan and proposed it, and we're put through a lot of great questions by principals and the curriculum director. And then the idea of it, and it's worked very well, is we just said, okay, you know, kids need skill. So we had skill-based classes that everyone could quantify. Even robotics said, okay, Python 2 or could be 9 weeks or 18 weeks, drawing and painting skills. So everyone had to break down what skills they would offer. And we had a class in design. And then after that, kids were independent. And then how the system kind of operated is then when students came into class, they weren't coming into drawing and painting class. They were coming in to be an artist or an innovator or a creator. And we just turned it around because at the end, that's what they're really trying to look at. And we also were portfolio based. All kids kept blogs throughout their years at school to trace that. And at the end of the day, what we also were trying to manage is fear. Everyone kind of says, how often I will say in some schools, oh, the IB, oh, the AP, and it can be kind of, instead of a point thing, it can be, something kids get inside of them. It's not good for well-being. So we had kids that basically took more risks. They wanted to be in subjects. And then at the end, we did say, by the way, if you want to take the AP, it's your choice. We think we would predict your score. We're a bit at coefficients. We had to say, what would the coefficient be if they graded? And then kids could choose. And I know IB, I taught IB too. IB is a little different. But then when it was kid choice, it reversed it. And then a lot more students took the risk. So we had higher numbers taking the AP, and we had better results at the end, which actually ended up over the years, and higher acceptance rates, actually. So
great. Thank you so much, Donny. Really appreciate that. So one more question before we get into our closing question. And I'd just like to ask, and we asked this a little bit of Addie and Lila, but how, when we create flexible structures, there's the potential for not everyone to come along, right? Maybe the introverts or the students that are still figuring things out, or those that have learning differences or different resources. Would someone be open to addressing the question of how this actually supports equity across your school rather than maybe hinders this for students? Camp?
I'll take that from a NEA perspective, and Jeremy hit on this. As we know, not all learners learn the same. As a matter of fact, particularly post-COVID, it's a wide array of learning styles and approaches. So having a flex schedule that allows for more time for certain things allows for those different types of entry points and support for students, so that it's not always the 65-minute block every single day. Here's a different way to experience a class for a student. So I think being attentive to differentiated, not only teaching, but differentiated schedules helps all student learning.
Great. Thank you so much. And I know we have such a great panel here. I think we could dig into any of these questions for a full 60 minutes. But as our time is flying, I'm going to take us into closure. So there's so much to talk about today, but I'd like to leave us with a closing thought from each of our panelists. And that closing thought would be, what's your piece of advice for people on this webinar? So we know we have people on this webinar from all over the world. We have people that are in schools that have 3,000 students, 200 students, public schools, independent schools, international schools. And it may not be that every school is ready to implement a full flex day into their schedule, but there's ways to do it in smaller ways. And so whether your advice is for a teacher or an administrator or a parent or a student, what would be the one piece of advice that you'd like to leave our audience with today? And I think we'll start in the United States and we'll move over to Germany. So we'll go Tom, Camp, Lila, and then Jeremy, Donny, Addie.
Great. And my advice is to first make sure that your schedule reflects your values and your programmatic needs, not that you're trying to jam those into a non-flexible schedule. And second, I would say, don't be afraid to experiment and to try. During COVID, many schools had to pivot on a dime and change their schedule. So it is possible. And you can do it for a short period of time, for a few weeks or a month. So don't be afraid to experiment and to possibly fail. Camp.
Thanks, Tom. My advice would be to communicate. And whether you're an admin, communicate the why and communicate with others about how you want to experiment or try something. And as a teacher, be courageous to have a voice, be like, this could really deepen the learning for my students. How can we make this happen? So like we said throughout this call, that our models that you're hearing about today may not necessarily vibe with what you do, but communicate it out and see what changes you can make if it's about better student learning. Lila.
My advice is for both probably faculty and administrators as well as students, and that is that learning doesn't just happen inside the classroom, but it also happens outside of the classroom. And that just like me being able to kind of miss class and do this panel and learn more from everyone in this panel, I'm learning, just as much, or if not just different things than I would be learning in class. And I think having these experiences is extremely valuable. And I think students always need to jump at these opportunities, and faculty and administrators need to support them as well. So that's my advice.
And my piece of advice is to have that North Star, have that why. And for me, it's about putting students first. I believe that in education, we have years and years and years of research on what is best for students, and what often gets in the way is the adults. And so if we keep the students in mind, if we keep them at our forefront, and we make every decision in their best interest, I think we're definitely moving along. So think about that as the piece of advice. Donny.
Yeah, thanks. I would say as we move from that, it's that empowerment, to move autonomously in life, is to have them empowered and not be afraid, but also understand themselves for wellness is a balance. So I think, for their empowerment to be globalized citizens and to go out into the world, that's the shift we need to do in schools. And so I would say, to think about the future is to think about, how are we changing our systems now?
And my advice for students who are starting out with a flexible schedule or flexible time it's okay not to know what you're going to do or what you want to try, but you just need to try. You need to try a lot of different things until eventually you find what works for you. You find your spark.
Perfect ending note, Addie. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists. A huge thank you especially to Addie and Lila for sharing their student perspective. I think we got a lot of interesting ideas today to bring back, and I hope that no matter where you are, type of school, you got some inspiration, some spark.